Hello and welcome to Upstate Report, a 15-minute program with Robert F. Kennedy, United States Senator from New York State. I'm Donald McIsaac, and I'll serve as moderator for this first of a series of unrehearsed programs, wherein Senator Kennedy is asked a variety of questions on various issues on national and state subjects. Sitting with us in the studio on either side of Senator Kennedy to ask these questions are Mr. Dick Gale, Washington representative from Gannett Newspapers, and Mr. Harry Thayer, president of radio station WGHQ, Kingston, New York. WGHQ is owned by the New York Herald Tribune. To start our program with the first question, Mr. Gale.
Senator, looking beyond the airline strike, what kind of legislation do you think we need on a permanent basis to handle situations like this, or do we need any?
Well, first I think that we need legislation. I think that one of the great problems that's been created over the period perhaps of the last few years, but maybe going back further than that, is that in these disputes between labor and management, the public interest is frequently not represented. I think we saw it in the subway strike in New York City. I think to some extent in the newspaper strikes that have taken place, but other strikes that affect other than those individuals who work for the government, the city, local, federal, state government, where there are usually laws to cover those employees. But I think in these other major strikes, as which I say affect more than one area of the United States, frequently the general public is not represented. Their role is not considered. The inconvenience to them does not play a part in the negotiations that take place between the union leaders and management. I think it's essential that that be changed. Now, what form that's going to take, I don't think that we've considered. President Johnson has said in State of the Union message in January that he would send up some suggestions. This was shortly after the subway strike in New York City. Those suggestions as yet have not been sent to Congress. I think that it's important, if we've learned a lesson from the airline strike, it's important that we receive those suggestions, those recommendations, and that the Labor Committee hold hearings on it. I would like to see those hearings begin this session, and that we receive those recommendations, and that we also receive recommendations from others as to what needs to be done. Obviously, we can't prevent the right to strike. It's basic in the United States. But also, I think that it's extremely important that with our economy as complicated as it is at the present time, that the public interest be represented in any of these negotiations. Now, the form that that takes, I think, is going to have to be worked out. It's difficult because it's going to get us into an area that the Congress and the executive branch of the government, Washington, the federal government, would be reluctant to get into in the past. But I think that we've seen from this strike, from the longshoreman strike, from the railroad strike in 1963 and others, that some action is necessary.
Senator Kennedy, I'd like to ask a question here, if I can, with respect to the Hudson River. You know as well as I do, it's in a sorry condition. It's polluted badly, both in the water and above the water, insofar as the air is we're concerned, from Newburgh north up the Hudson River. I know that you have a bill, and as does with Senator Williams of New Jersey, to do something about this situation. But can you tell us what we can expect, and will the bill have any teeth in it for enforcement? That's what we're interested in.
Well, I think that first, as far as the Hudson River is concerned, we called for a conference, which I think was very productive last August. I wrote to the Secretary of HEW. We had a conference. An examination was made of the Hudson River. It established without any question the fact that the pollution of the Hudson River, that had been contested up to that time by the governor. We established quite clearly that it was polluted. The state then put in regulations where 4 million people were dropping sewerage into the Hudson River. The state of New York then put in regulations to prevent that and treat that kind of sewerage. I think that was an important step forward. I co-sponsored some legislation appropriating $6 billion over a 5-year period, which would make money available to the states to deal with water pollution. It does have teeth in it. The bill as was passed in the United States Senate is a strong bill. It would be very helpful to the state of New York because we were able to put provisions in it which did not restrict the size of the grant. Our problems in New York are greater than other areas of the country. Frequently, when legislation's been passed in the past, it's been aimed at the smaller states and smaller communities. this legislation would help the Hudson River and would really, over a period of 5 years, make it possible to clean the Hudson River up with the money that's going to be available at the state level. Together with this money that be made available at the federal level, we'd really be able to accomplish something. Unfortunately, when it's now over in the House of Representatives, I gather at the urging of the administration, is cutting that back to $3.6 billion, which will, and putting in some restrictions on its use, which will be very damaging to the state of New York. So I think it's very important that the Senate version of the bill, which, as I said, I co-sponsored, is passed and accepted.
Do you think that your proposal is stronger than the recommendation made by Governor Rockefeller?
Well, that's on the what we're going to do specifically about the Hudson River and the spoiling of the Hudson River, not just on the question of pollution. I think that what Senator Williams and I have suggested, and Congressman Ottinger have suggested, would protect the Hudson River. I don't think that that's been done over the period of the last few years. People have talked about it, but the steps haven't been taken at the state level, whether it's the state expressway, which is causing such concern in Kingston and Tarrytown and other areas, or whether it's some of these other projects, or just basically permitting the Hudson River to be polluted and then not recognizing that action was needed. It shows, or I think demonstrates quite clearly, that we haven't done enough. I think the bill that we suggested, which would bring the federal government in with the state of New Jersey and the state of New York, develop a compact between all interested groups and private citizens, such as the Delaware Compact, which was passed under the leadership of President Kennedy in 1961, which has been so valuable in that area. We could have this kind of agreement between the two states and the federal government. In my judgment, the individual citizen would be protected.
Mr. Gale?
Senator, could I ask a two-part question on the civil rights bill that is going to come up in the Senate fairly soon? Do you think there are good prospects for a bill that contains a strong provision against discrimination in housing? And do you personally favor exempting owners of single-family homes from such provisions?
Well, I think in the answer to the first part of the question, I would think that there's a chance of having it passed. I think that it's going to require, again, the acceptance by both Republicans and Democrats. I think that as far as the kind of legislation that I would like to see legislation that's going to be most broadly accepted through our country and will be accepted in Congress. I'm not one of those who feel that you go down in a fight that is lost and feel that you've served your country or served the cause of civil rights. And I think that the administration backing the more moderate, as it's been described, bill in the House of Representatives was the correct decision. It might be that I would like to see more strength, or perhaps have it stronger, but I think under the circumstances, that would be the legislation that I think it was proper for them to back, and would be the kind of legislation that I would support.
Well, we have to start out with a fairly small...
Well, I don't know if it's... Yes, I think it's obviously a controversial area and a very difficult area for people. I think that it's important that we take it. I think that we should accept, however, that that's not the answer to the problem of our ghettos or the problem of our core cities. It'll have some effect, but in my judgment, it's not going to make these tremendous difficult problems that we've been facing here in this country over the period of the last 5 years particularly disappear.
Mr. Thayer?
Senator Kennedy, I'd like to ask you this. I think we've had some pretty dramatic instances in the last few weeks and months, and particularly very briefly, very presently, the need for stronger legislation with regard to the transportation, ownership, and possession of weapons. Do you see any hope that the federal government will do anything to pass a strong law regarding the ownership and transportation, sale of weapons?
Yeah, well, the administration sent up, after consultation with Congress, sent up a very strong law which would deal with the problem. That's been considered in the Judiciary Committee now for about 3 years. And it's never been reported to the floor. I receive more mail from those who are opposed to any legislation in this field than on any other subject since I've been United States Senator. It's organized, but I receive a greater amount of mail on that subject than any other piece of legislation.
Game clubs and groups like that?
The Rifle Club, particularly, Rifle Association. I think that it's important that we have legislation. We've had 750,000 people killed since 1900 by rifles and guns here in the United States, more than have been killed in all of the wars that the United States has been involved in. I think that it's important that we have legislation dealing with this very difficult problem, and I think that those who oppose legislation, which is not going to prevent people who have the mental ability and the skill from owning arms or keeping arms, but it's going to be legislation which will keep them out, I would hope, would keep it out of the hands and has the teeth to keep it out of the hands of those who should not have guns, should not have weapons.
Mm-hmm. Senator, more and more people seem to think that there will never be any negotiations to end the war in Vietnam, that the one side or the other will just quit or fade away. Do you think there's any prospect for negotiations between the two sides?
I don't see any immediate prospects for that. I think they have decided that they're going to dig in and that they are going to eventually defeat the United States, and I think that particularly perhaps in the last few months we've indicated that we feel that we can take military action which will destroy the Viet Cong and destroy their will to resist. So I think that both sides are hardening and it's becoming more difficult. I don't see any prospects for negotiations in the immediate future.
Do you see a 10 or 15-year war as Premier Key has mentioned?
I would hope that I think the conflict, the troubles in Vietnam will extend for a number of years. I would hope that it wouldn't be that long a period of time.
Senator Kennedy, I'd like to ask you a question. How do you feel about and how do you stand with respect to the state lottery that's proposed for New York State?
Well, I'm opposed to a state lottery, but I think that it should be left to the people, and if the people decide that they want a state lottery, then I think that that's going to be accepted in this state.
For what it's worth, I agree with you.
But I personally would vote against a state lottery.
I'd like to ask one more question, if I can. How do you feel, sir, about 18-year-old voting? There's talk in New York State of reducing the age from 21 to 18.
I'm in favor of reducing it to 18. I'd like to get it down to about 12. But
Well, how about all across the board or just for servicemen?
No, I'd lower it. I think first because of communications, because of education, because of a greater interest amongst our young people in political life, and the fact that young men of the age of 18 are apt to be called up for service and all across the world, that I think that they should be permitted to vote.
Gentlemen, we have time for just one brief question.
Senator, do you believe that the Democrats will defeat Governor Rockefeller this fall?
I think they can. Whether they will or not, I don't know. I think they can. I think if the election was held now, a Democrat would beat Governor Rockefeller. But I think that we have tremendous skill and ability in the Democratic Party in the state of New York of defeating ourselves, and it's possible that we can do it again.
On that hopeful note, we will conclude our program. Thank you, Senator Kennedy, Mr. Thayer, and Mr. Gale. You've been listening to Upstate Report, first in a series of unrehearsed programs with Senator Robert F. Kennedy of New York, answering questions on national and state issues with special emphasis on upstate New York. Our guest newsmen have been Mr. Dick Gale, representing Gannett Newspapers, and Mr. Harry Thayer, president of radio station WGHQ, Kingston, New York. This is Donald McIsaac. Thank you very much for listening.
The 7th Congressional District of California is ably represented by Congressman Jeff Cohalan. Congressman Cohalan has been a fighter for social legislation, for civil rights, and now to find 2 new peace initiatives in South Vietnam. He has the respect and affection of all the members of the House of Representatives for the